Okay, this video is still on the literal rule, but what we are going to do is we are going to discuss it. So this is a discussion-based answer to a possible 8-mark question, which could be discuss the advantages of the literal rule or discuss the disadvantages of the literal rule. In theory, it could include both advantages and disadvantages, but I think it's probably more likely to be discuss the advantages or discuss the disadvantages. So first of all, let's look at advantages of using the literal rule. Well, it's a very simple and quick rule. All the judges have to do is give the word its plain and ordinary meaning. So it's really quick to do in court, and that's beneficial. Why is it beneficial? Well, it's cheap, and court cases are notoriously expensive. They're long and they're expensive. So the fact that this is a quick rule of interpretation to use is a good thing because it's quick, which therefore makes the court case cheaper. You can kind of expand this a little bit further and say that one of the other reasons it's quick is judges don't have to look through external aids, extrinsic aids to find the meaning of the word, so they can just look in a dictionary. The next point I'd perhaps talk about is the fact that the law is certain. So we know the plain and ordinary meaning is going to be given to this word. And certainty in law is good because it's predictable. There's a predictable result for lawyers, for the defendant if it's a criminal case, and for judges. So certainty is important. It means that the law is going to be applied and interpreted consistently. Again, something else, we want justice in law. The rule of law says that law should be applied equally to all. The next point I would talk about is judges and the fact that judges are unlikely to make any error. The reason for this is because you are giving the word its plain and ordinary meaning. Therefore, when Parliament wrote that word in the Act, judges are just simply interpreting what Parliament wanted. So they're not going to try and guess what Parliament intended. It's very simple. They will just look at the word and think, right, this is what it means. That's what Parliament put in it, so therefore it must be correct. So hopefully there will be few errors in interpretation. Judges are also respecting their constitutional position. So the role of a judge is to apply and interpret law. They should not be making law. The law-making body is Parliament. Parliament is sovereign. Parliament are democratically elected. Therefore, judges, by using the literal rule, are not going beyond their power. They are just interpreting the law. Disadvantages of the literal rule, well, the first one we said right at the beginning of the explanation is that it can lead to absurdity. So in Berryman, it's really quite unfair. In Whiteley, it's absurd that he was found not guilty. He committed some kind of electoral fraud, yet using the literal rule says no, he didn't. And I don't think Parliament wanted that. So there can be absurdity, injustice in Berryman. Is it unfair that she didn't receive any compensation? So using the literal rule can lead to injustice and absurdity. It also assumes that Acts of Parliament are very clear and free from errors, and this may not always be the case. Despite the fact that Acts of Parliament go through so many checks, errors they do exist. There is human error, and Acts of Parliament are not always clear, so therefore trying to interpret the word doesn't always work. It also doesn't allow judges to develop the law. So as society changes, laws need to develop, the meaning of words change, so things evolve. If you were to use the example in the earlier video about bodily harm, judges have now said bodily harm includes the mind. Well, if you use the literal rule, does bodily harm include the mind? No, it doesn't. So somebody who caused great mental distress to another person would have to be found not guilty of ABH or GBH. So the literal rule is very restricted and it doesn't allow for development. It's also quite out of date. It's a very old rule, and maybe judges now should be looking at what did Parliament intend when they made this rule? What did Parliament intend? So using the literal rule doesn't allow judges to develop the law. It doesn't allow them to correct an error. If the meaning of the word is ridiculous or absurd and doesn't fit the situation, they are just sticking with that meaning of the word and they are unable to correct an error. So hopefully that's given you some ideas for a discussion question.